Hello, everyone. At least to those of you who are watching. Um, I thought I thought I would also include videos in this channel where I talk about how I feel or talk about my experiences, because in a way it's kind of like a record of who I am. Because granted, I could write everything down, and I am starting to write things down, but I was thinking today, and it's more like an itch now than anything else. I recently, in the middle of July of this year, I took a trip along the West Coast. I got to go home, where I grew up exactly, and see my family and explore more of the West Coast than I ever had. Because I had never been to Oregon, I'd never been to Washington, and taking the 101 through those states was just absolutely breathtaking. And the more I think about it, the more I realize that, my soul has been broken for a long time. And it's not really an exaggeration when I say that. In part, there are multiple factors that have contributed to, my decline, since childhood. I was very awkward and shy as a kid. I had a hard time understanding people and making friends, mostly because I lacked a lot of empathy. And I still, to an extent, lack empathy, but not to the extent that it was when I was a child. Because for the most part, I see things through largely an objective lens. Not to say it's purely objective, I'm just saying that for a vast majority of things, I tend to see them through a lens of logic and reason.
Go ahead, Mr. Bull.
Sorry, my cat's vying for my attention. But anyway, so it was difficult for me to, make friends with other people because I didn't understand them. I didn't understand their actions, their motives, and I constantly questioned them. And it made people uncomfortable. And I always wondered that, and apparently, my parents would always parrot the same thing, other people are afraid of you because you are, in a way, a smarter individual. I never felt that way. I never really, fed into that belief. I just kind of brushed it aside. And, over time, it got better. I made some friends in California, but, at some point, I wouldn't be able to spend a lot of time with them because they were always busy, or their parents were very strict and did not like me for whatever reason. Well, not for whatever reason. They've told me before, but, they're largely minor reasons in my opinion. But, in 2008, I moved with my mother and father to Texas. And it was a difficult move for me because, I was in a completely different state. I was thousands of miles away from my family. Well, maybe a couple thousand miles away, but still, it was difficult. But eventually I made some friends. And, I eventually, graduated high school. I got a small scholarship for community college, and I eventually got my degrees from UT, in physics and astronomy. And ever since then I've been I guess there was a hole in me that had been growing, and that hole was made larger due to some losses in my family, due to heartache, due to the feeling of betrayal from working towards a goal, working towards a degree, and expecting at least, the opportunity to live a normal life. And that opportunity just does not exist. And I feel sorry for a lot of people who fed into that belief as well. Because there are a lot of people in my generation and, probably prior generations as well, and, Gen Z and all that, who have experience, who have degrees, who have a lot of knowledge and skills, yet still can't find work. And can't even find work that would pay them enough to live. I mean, we're in a cost of living crisis, and if I'm being honest, it makes me wonder, why am I alive? Why bother? Society as a whole seems to tell me and tell a lot of my generation and a lot of younger people to fucking die. That's the message that I'm getting. Because if you're telling me that, oh, you should go get a job, either way, that pays maybe 15 bucks an hour, maybe a little more, and just hope to get something better, well, that's not living. That's not even surviving. That's just trying to get your next meal in. That's not living at all. It just makes me wonder how a lot of people put up with this. And, the thing that does kind of worry me, maybe not so much because I have differing opinions here. My views on humanity have been conflicting for a while, but I feel like a lot of people in the future, and not too distant future, may opt out for self-deletion. Because what is the purpose of living in this very shitty society that, you never asked to be a part of, that doesn't even guarantee you the opportunity to even just live a normal life? I'm not even talking about a life of luxury. I'm talking about a life where you can afford to pay all of your expenses and maybe have a little bit left over to save and to grow as a person, to use that money to save up to maybe go to school, or maybe to move somewhere else that you feel is home to you. But that just largely does not exist for a lot of people. And so that's the thought that I have. And to be honest, those are thoughts that I have as well. Because given my situation, I have a job. Granted, it doesn't quite pay enough for me to fully live on my own, at least not without cutting out major expenses like health insurance or cutting back on groceries. But, I've honestly debated, and this thought still plagues me as well, if I should just leave everything behind, just sell every single thing I have, leave Texas, and just have one final hurrah, along the West Coast, and see as much as I can, before the money runs out. Because, job prospects, the thing that's stopping me from trying to actually leave Texas and go back home to California, or even move to, Oregon, or maybe even Washington, somewhere close to the coastline, is the fact that, I don't even think I could get a job there. My skill set is largely in tutoring and instructing others, in physics or math. I can do manual labor, that's not an issue, because I do powerlifting as well. But, I don't see that happening if I actually made this attempt. In reality, if I were to actually leave Texas and just go back home, it would probably be a suicide mission. Given today's, socioeconomic conditions, it largely would be. But, despite having said that, I am trying to weigh my options and figure out what to do. I'm kind of thinking about trying to save up as much as I can, more, if possible, and, and just leave at some point. Because I feel like, this rift in my soul is growing the more I stay here in a state that is not my home, is far away from my family, and largely has just shown me no real opportunity. I thought there would be, but to a large extent, there's really nothing here for me. At least I feel. Yes, I have friends and that people who care about me, and it would hurt to leave them behind, but, the more I think about it, the more I realize that, I just miss home. And whether home will be, California, where I grew up, where I was born and raised, or, elsewhere, where I feel more connected and at peace with nature. Because that's how I felt when I was on this, adventure of mine. But I guess the purpose of this video is to just ask for advice. Those of you who maybe live in Oregon or live in California, or live in Washington, what jobs could I potentially, take up given my background. I worked in service, I've worked, as a tutor, I've worked a little bit in tech. My background's in physics and math mostly, but, I used to live close to LA, that's where my home was, not in LA, but close to it. But also, I was thinking about, because the one place I would really love to move to would be Astoria, Oregon, because I've only seen it for a day, but it was just quite an experience being able to see that place. And it's literally just a bridge away from Washington, so if I wanted to go visit Washington, go visit a couple places there, I could just drive over the bridge, and the furthest place I would want to visit is like 6 hours away. Not a terrible drive. It's a long drive, but not a terrible one. So, but, just the more I think about it, the more I realize that I think this is the medicine that would ultimately help me heal. It's just, I don't even know if I can afford the medicine. I don't even know if I can, risk that. Earlier today, I made a post on a social media platform called Threads. And someone was mentioning, just to take that leap to, let the universe decide. And as nice as that sounds, as optimistic as it is, you have to be a realist in the end. It was a nice thought, but, I can't rely on the goodwill of others to, pay for me to eat, to drink, to have a place to sleep, and to clothe myself, because society has largely agreed that that is not the contract. The contract is you get a job that people feel is valuable enough to earn all that. Despite the fact that a lot of people are underutilized in this society, and it just makes me wonder where we're heading. I'm not watching the news as much anymore, because God fucking damn it, it is pissing me off every single headline I see. But I'm just aware of what's going on, and I've been aware of it too. So, but overall, I can't take any more negative news for a while. I'll look at some headlines just to know what's going on, but I am not going to read anything further, at least not for a while. But I guess that's all I can say for now. These videos aren't scripted, by the way, in case anyone's wondering. I'm just speaking off the cuff here, but, I guess what I'm saying is that I miss home, yet home is pretty much unaffordable. So that leaves me with, the option to abandon everything here, sell everything, and use the savings that I have to hold out with a family member and see if I can get a job. That is extremely risky, and the odds are not that great, even given my credentials. It's not great. Or, there's an alternative, but, that's up for debate. So, anyway, just thought I would get that out there and talk a little bit. It does help me a bit. So, anyway, I hope whoever's watching this, I hope you're doing well, at least hopefully better than me. And I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.